Update 149 for Gran Turismo 7 as released. It has a bunch of different content that is really important. Eiger Nordwand is back. We have the BMW M3, we have a VGT Genesis, we have a roof from 2016, BMW M3, Ferrari Scuderia, Colin McRae's 98 Subaru, and also the Lamborghini Gallardo. However, the content is really not important as of this update. Eiger is really nice to have, and I love it, and I thank you very much for having it. But for update 149, I really think that this is a complete game changer for Gran Turismo 7. The most visible part of this 149 update is Eiger Nordwand. I'm sorry about pronunciation. I'm terribly excited about this one, and the reason is that when I started playing Gran Turismo, it was with Gran Turismo 5 Prologue, and this was one of the tracks back then. And even on a PlayStation 3, and I'm coming from a PC, driving this in PlayStation 3 was very interesting because the graphics were amazing. Even compared to games we had on a PC, the Gran Turismo just looked so much better. Back then that you had Need for Speed Shift, and that was basically about it, and that released a few years later. And even then, Gran Turismo 5 and Gran Turismo 5 Prologue looked really good, and this track was an excellent representation of the power of the PlayStation 3. Coming into Gran Turismo 7, Polyphony Digital has made some choices to change the scenery, to change a little bit of the layout. They have done that before. They have done that before in other tracks, and we can see now here when we go into this long sweeper of a right. Now we have the pits, and the pits are now the tunnel. The tunnel is basically serving the pits, and before you had the pits more up in the hill, and it was a very secluded area. And I'm kind of sad about that because I really loved that tunnel back in Gran Turismo 5 and Gran Turismo 6. I really love the tunnel section in the track, and sadly we're not going to have that unless of course you want to go to the pits. But everything else that we see around here, it's just so much better looking. The graphics are of course much better. It's 2 generations of improvement, and we can see that it changed completely. Very photorealistic. The models are so much better. The mountains look so much better. The Swiss scenery looks very close to reality. And remember, this road doesn't really exist. These are hiking paths here and there that hodgepodge way Polyphony Digital created a layout for a race. Now a few things do change. Not really the 4 consecutive hairpins, not really the corner over there. Of course, the pits we talked about, the tunnel we talked about, but a few small things changed compared to a Gran Turismo 5 Prologue model. When we go to this sweeper, the sweeper is a little bit straighter, I believe, and then there's a small bump over here that we used to have, but it was a little more aggressive back then. This area is very much the same, very close to it. Then we have this small S into the long right-hander with the hotel on top, just like back then. And then one of the biggest changes that I also see in terms of layout or in terms of playability is this small jump that we have just over there. That used to be so much bigger back in the other model, and that created a lot of mess, especially when you're playing multiplayer. Cars will be flying, hitting the grounds, and going all over the place. And also that thing is also part of the update, and we'll be talking about that later. However, the biggest change on this update isn't really the pieces of content. It's good to have Eiger Nordwand. I loved it. It blew my mind when I started driving it on a PlayStation 3. It's not the Gallardo that we're driving now or the Scuderia that we've driven before. It's good to have those cars. It's good to have the BMW M3, and Polyphony Digital knows how to pick the cars to update the game with. They know how to do automotive history, and they do it well. The most important thing is something that is going to be underlying all of this, no matter if you're driving this on the steering wheel like I am or the gamepad. It is the tire model and also the suspension model that have been changed. The tire model has been updated with information or built with Michelin, which is good. It's good to have, at least in theory, more up-to-date information. But in practice, what that means, especially for a person like myself that drives mostly Gran Turismo on these types of road cars, not so much the racing cars, I much prefer the road cars, is that if you drive before on Gran Turismo, you had a very small window of grip, or you had a window of grip, and if you were past that window of grip, and if you were past the tire slip angle that was optimal, you had a huge tire grip fall off, and you had no information on the force feedback. And the tire model and the suspension model don't only affect the way that the car handles, but also the feeling on a force feedback. And in this way, in this update, the tires feel much more natural, in my opinion. Yours might be different, but in my opinion, road cars, no matter if I tried, you know, comfort mediums like I was doing before with an 86 earlier when this came out, or, you know, with the Scuderia, or now with the Gallardo, or even with the Supra that I'm trying to build for drift. We'll talk about that just in a second. The fall off of the tires is definitely more natural. The car feels more controllable. It doesn't mean that you're going to save your life. You still need to do, you know, all the basic stuff. This car likes to have the rear, you know, go back to the front, especially if you're not braking straight, because the engine is totally on the back. And that also highlights the suspension changes, where the car is now reactive to the weight shift, but also the force feedback is now giving you some information of what the hell is going on. So I'm not driving this car in the most optimal way. That means the car wants to rotate because I'm braking way too hard for that specific corner. Once you brake in a straight line, there's no problem, which means the car, or rather the model in the tire model and the suspension model, are working in a way that are more, you know, more natural, more believable, or at least it's going in a good way. It doesn't mean that is at the level of, you know, other sims. It means it's doing its own thing, and it does it incredibly well. And driving a road car now in Gran Turismo 7, it feels definitely more natural, much more than it was before. Since we're talking about suspension and we have dirt, and also we have a Colin McRae car, let's talk about how the suspension changes driving through dirt. Here at Windmills, we have this little jump over here and also this jump over here. That's if you were doing the challenges before, it really meant if you didn't have the car straight in a very specific way, it really meant that you're going to hit the wall and probably have to redo the challenge again. So the changes in suspension have a deep impact, or a deep effect, driving at these rally stages. The force feedback also changes a bit. It's a little bit faster, in my opinion. The information feels more accurate than before. Driving definitely in gravel is now it's easier than before. It kind of feels like you are more in the zone. In some ways, it replicates a bit of EAWRC, and while before it was I think a little bit too chaotic, now it's more conducive to a driving that is easier. If that's more arcade or not, not sure. If it does matter, I'm not sure, because I don't think these stages are very much used. But the suspension has had suspension changes, and also the tire model changes they have had incredible deep effect in this game. And I think, in my opinion, even though it is feeling easier right now, I think this is definitely going in the correct direction. The last point is going to be about drifting, and that really highlights the massive impact that these physics changes on the tire model and suspension has had in Gran Turismo 7. I'm driving here a bone stock GT86/BRZ, which it's a very easy car to drift. I've drifted one when it came out back in 2011 or 2012. And now we're gonna do that in Tsukuba. If I wanted to do this in the previous version of Gran Turismo 7, I really couldn't. It really shows you how much of the leap that this update is. I know it's not the cleanest of drifts. Even here, it's not the cleanest of drifts. I'm not a very good drifter here. For me, it's easier to drift in Gran Turismo, BMG or Assetto Corsa. It was easier for me to drift in Gran Turismo 6, And in Gran Turismo 7, you know, drifting always eluded me, but here it really shows you that you can basically control the car more. You have more feeling, you understand what the front tires are doing a little bit better. Once again, easier for me to drift on Assetto Corsa, but you know, it's a massive change in terms of physics, and I could never do this because before, if I did this, the car would just pick it up on grip on the front and it would just go directly to the left wall. I did need to change a little bit on the settings for the controllers, for force feedback 5 and sensitivity F5. If I drop the sensitivity, the car isn't responsive. If I go with the method that was before, I believe 10 and 10 or 1 and 10 or something like that, too much sensitivity will just make the car feel too nervous. And sensitivity 5, it feels more like you are in control of a steering rack. And this for me works very well, I mean. So what we have here is something that is more in line to driving games that are more, you know, on the simulation side. It's still very much Gran Turismo. It's still very much the physics that are used to Gran Turismo, or in 5 and 6, or here in 7 or Sport, but it has a more accurate feeling. It has and more information on the force feedback. You feel like the tires are scrubbing when you're hitting understeer, like I was doing there. You know, even though it was low speed, you turn it, the rotation makes the car, you know, say, hey, you are hitting understeer, and you feel the tires scrubbing. You feel the changes in the weight, and that is really important, not just for drifting. It's really important for driving. And now, as of this moment, Gran Turismo 7 never felt better. In my opinion, update 149 is more important than Spec 2. For me, it's a game changer, and I know that game changer is thrown a lot for the most minute of things, but in this case, it completely picks up on the handling physics of Gran Turismo 7 and it completely transforms it into something that is far more interesting to drive than before. With some of the things or the criticisms that I had, if they are not outright fixed, they are fixed in a way that they are not such big deals anymore. There are other small things in terms of quality of life improvements, especially if you're driving a DD Extreme. The force feedback does feel better, and also that on the DD Extreme wheel, you do have the lights on the D-pads showing you the correct lights. So red for brake bias, blue for TCS, and whatnot. So if you haven't done the update, man, you really need to go the updates. I really think this changes Gran Turismo 7.